Welcome back, Councillor. Can you hear me? Councillor Abbott, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Righto, so let's begin the July Development and Environment Services Committee. Firstly, applications for attending meeting via a video link. I haven't received one, but I'm taking it by your appearing on the screen in front of me, Councillor Abbott, that you're making a verbal application to attend the meeting via video link.
Oh, I didn't know we had to make an application for standing committees.
I'm being nodded at that is the case, but I'm happy to move a motion that we accept a verbal application from you now. I'll move that. It's seconded by Councillor Campbell. All those in favour? Aye. So we'll move on to apologies. I believe we have an apology from Councillor Abbott. Councillor Watts, are there any further apologies?
No, Mr. Chair.
Right, would someone like to move? I will, so moved by Councillor Campbell. I will second. All in favour? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest?
Nil received.
No, nil received. Public participation. Just to advise you all, there are 3 booked for today that we will, rather than have you all speak up front, what I prefer to do is to have you speak prior to the to your business item being discussed on the agenda. So there are no site inspections. So we'll move straight away into the first business item, which is DESC 07.1, which is a DA to do with the Merriward Bakery. And I will hand over to Marianne Ngoyen for her public participation. Can you hear me, Marianne?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, that's great. So we'll give you 5 minutes, and then any of the committee might like to ask questions of you that they can at that point, and we'll come back to you and give you a right of reply or anything like that if it is necessary. So your 5 minutes start now.
Oh, thank you for letting me speak. I'm just speaking on behalf of my mum for our renovations at the bakery. We received a request that we would need to provide some parking spaces as we're increasing the floor space in our cafe. However, I was hoping that we could get maybe a reduced request for that one, because we are just enclosing our existing dining area at the moment. We think that the economic costs involved in sort of a car park space in our area would be too much. Our land is also not really appropriate. I've spoken to Paul Smith about the case as well, and he's attended the site, and he's recommended as well that the land is on a bit of a slope and probably wouldn't be suitable to create parking spaces. Other than that, I just hope if you could take a look at our application and to sort of provide a nicer experience for residents and also community members, and also passersby, tourists to stop by. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any of the councillors have any question? Any of the committee? Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Councillor Ron Campbell. I'm from Merriward. What did you have envisaged to perhaps paint up or beautify the entrance to the bakery?
The entrance, well, probably just to retile the front of the shop. Maybe some new signage as well, and just a minor paint job, just to freshen up the face, basically.
Thank you. Yes, just further to that, thank you. And also the covered-in area at the back. From my viewing of the photos, etc., there'll be a section still open. Will that be correct, or is it all going to be enclosed?
Yes, that's right. No, ideally we'd want to sort of still create like an outdoor open vibe. It will be slightly enclosed just to help with a little bit of the environmental, maybe a little bit of the heat or the cold, but it would still ideally be open.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's a great concept. I'd be very happy to support it. It's great, the bakery at Merriwall.
Thank you.
Okay, Matt, as I normally do, I'll hand over to you to present a brief summary of the application. Perhaps you might like to address the car parking thing.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as you said, the application is for alterations and additions to the bakery. There's an upgrade to the front facade, which involves new tiling and painting the window frames. There's a new indoor dining area, which is over the existing outdoor area. There's a cool room and a storeroom, new toilets, and a food preparation areas. And they're obviously shown on the plans in attachment 2. The additional floor area actually generates the need for 11 parking spaces on site. I guess the issue is that the parking would be required at the back of the property. I think it's unlikely that customers would actually use that parking because it is around the back. It's an existing business that's been there for, I think, 40 years. The area that is being enclosed, most of that area is already used for outdoor dining anyway. It's a bit of an outdoor area. So I guess it really doesn't generate, I don't think it would generate the 11 parking spaces that the DCP would normally require. So we believe that the non-compliance is acceptable in these circumstances. We've recommended approval of the application, subject to the conditions of consent in attachment 1. So the other thing I'll just mention too, the application was placed on public exhibition during May of this year, and there were no submissions received. So we've assessed the application. We're satisfied that it's suitable proposal for this site.
Thanks, Matt. As I usually do, I'll go around the room. I might start with you, Councillor, on screen. Sir, if you've got any comments, please say them now.
My only comment is it looks great. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, look, I agree with that. It does look great, and also the fact that it is very necessary, but it also means that the Bow Street needs to be freed up from those buses staying there, because the number of people that come in to that bakery are a lot, and it's a great facility for Merriwall, and especially if it's upgraded. It's been there for a long time, back in the Johnsons. They owned the bakery and started it off, and it'll just be a great addition to the Merriwall tourist area too. So I support the resolution.
I'm entirely comfortable with it. I think it's a great little business, and I'm delighted to see them upgrading their facility. So are you moving the recommendation?
Yes, I'll be happy to so move.
I'll second it.
It looks like you're seconding, Councillor Abbott, and I'm in favour. So that resolution is passed. Right, we will move on to DESC 07.2, and we'll begin with, which is the fuel station out on Mccarthy Diva. So I'd like to invite Oliver, is that you, McCarthy, to come up. I think, Oliver, the easiest way for you to have a microphone that the councillor on Zoom can hear you is to use that end chair there. Oh, I was saying that one there. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's up to you. And can you press that red? Press the button and we'll be able to all hear you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Oliver McCarthy from Yukon Projects, working on behalf of Burton Contractors for this particular development application. The application's for a service station and takeaway food and drink at Mccarthy Street in Scone. And the which you guys know, the bypass has resulted in multiple service stations within Scone and takeaway food and drinks being cut out in essence, and the ability to capture the passing traffic, approximately 9,000 passing vehicles per day for those local businesses, has changed. And this development application was originally anticipated to or forecasted to capture the passing traffic as a result of the bypass, and will be the primary service station for those passing vehicles. The Scone Business Park was approved in 2007 for the IN2 light industrial subdivision, and those lots have been on the market for a considerable amount of time. We also anticipate that the approval of this development will see incoming traffic to and from the business park, and will stimulate further growth in that industrial park. And we're expecting sales to fall off the back of that approval as well. So this application was originally lodged with a drive-through offering to takeaway food and drink, but through consultation with Paul Smith in the planning division, we were able to work through multiple requests for information to achieve a better design outcome on the site, and ultimately get to a really good planning outcome where we're not only are we producing a good offering to the market, but we're also we've also worked through all the major planning concerns, and we've been able to negotiate a good outcome with Traffic for New South Wales to pull access off the fourth arm to the roundabout, which will see ease of access for all patrons visiting the site, but also produce a better safety design outcome on that roundabout. So we're very much looking forward to getting a positive outcome and stimulating the business park, and off the back of that we hope to see employment in the facility itself, employment through construction, but then employment through the sequential development of the business park off the back of that also.
Thank you for that. Do any of the committee have questions for Oliver Mccarthy while he's available?
May I, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. My understanding is the fact that this will really alleviate some of the concerns for heavy vehicles to come into the area without having to go down Kelly Street, which it's much better not to do that. And also the provision, I just read here, provision for those heavy vehicles to park. If can they stay there overnight if some of those heavy vehicles wish to stay there? Is that correct?
Not in this particular facility. The improved design outcome to the roundabout access will see heavy vehicles being able to utilise that in a better fashion. However, the development itself will be limited to lighter vehicles.
So the semi-trailers, etc., that I'm speaking about, heavy vehicles, they will only be able to. Will they be able to access that site?
Not at this point in time.
Okay. Were you envisaging that to be at a later date?
There's opportunity for that with some residual land, or a lot of residual land still in play in the business park, and that's a conversation that we'll have to have at a later point in time.
But just to clear me on this, you're just saying here on page 48, 4 Bowsers, 24-hour operation, and provision for 28 car parking spaces, including 2 accessible spaces. So that's correct. So the trucks would not be able to use that facility.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Abbott, any questions? Righto, well, I'll hand over to you, Matt, for your summation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so as it says in the report, this application is for construction and use of a service station with a convenience store, a fuel canopy and 4 bowsers. There's obviously underground fuel storage tanks. It's a 24-hour operation. There's construction and use of a food and drink premises. There's a shared loading bay and service area. There's provision of 28 parking spaces on the site, including 2 accessible spaces. The proposal will also involve redesign and construction of the New England Highway and Mccarthy Street and Kelly Street intersection. There's construction of additional leg of the existing roundabout to gain access to the site, and there's associated landscaping and site signage. I thought we might just bring the site up on the screen if we can, just have a quick look. I'm sure you all know where it is, but just to be certain, it's this block. The little arrow is there. So as you know, the Scone bypass has been built since this photo was taken, and there's actually an off-ramp that comes in across the front of the site, which basically meant that some of the land along the front of this site was resumed by Transport for New South Wales to accommodate the off-ramp. When the application originally came in July last year, there was a proposal to have an access off the off-ramp into the site. But our engineers and Transport for New South Wales didn't support that proposal. So the applicant went away and amended the design and came back to us earlier this year. And that amended design was obviously sent off to Transport for New South Wales and reviewed by our engineers, and that was considered satisfactory. It basically took out that access off the off-ramp and involved realignment of the off-ramp approach to the roundabout. If you have a look at the plans in the report, so on page 69, page 69 is probably the best one. You can see the roundabout there, and that approach to that roundabout will be realigned. So it's a safer access, I guess, to the roundabout for trucks and vehicles. So there'll be a bit of work involved in that. The application was notified between 10th of July and 24th of July last year when it first came in. There was no submissions received at all. The site itself, obviously there's a lot of positive points about this particular site. It's away from residential areas, away from town. So obviously the impacts of the development will be less in this location. The site is zoned IN1 general industrial, IN2 light industrial. So the development is permissible with consent in this zone. There are a number of non-compliances with the development control plan, and they relate to advertising and signage. So the proposed pylon signs at the front of the service station exceed the permitted area for such signs in an industrial area. However, given the context of the development, the proposed signs we feel are adequate and suitable for this type of development, given its location on the highway and the fact that, again, it's away from any residential areas or built-up areas. The off-street parking, there's a shortfall of 10 parking spaces when we assess that under our DCP. Again, we feel that the shortfall is justified. The applicant actually submitted a traffic study where they looked at parking at other service stations in the Hunter region. And I think the areas they looked at were service stations at Morisset, I think Green Point was the other one, and another one as well. So they provide justification that for that shortfall and argue that the proposed 28 spaces was sufficient. Landscaping, it doesn't achieve the landscaping for 50% of the front setback and the depth of 3 metre landscaping, which is normally required. However, again, given the context of this development, we feel that it's suitable. On-site water supply, our DCP does require a minimum of 40,000 litres water storage. However, we've put although they haven't provided that, we've recommended a condition of consent requiring a 10,000 litre water tank to be provided. The other controls that it doesn't comply with, the activation of the New England Highway frontage. So previously we had a DCP for the Scone Business Park, and that was obviously developed before the bypass was constructed, and it required access to be provided from the rear and for parking to be behind the building line as well. But obviously, and the other thing was the 10-metre wide vegetation buffer as well. But obviously with the bypass that's been constructed, you know, that has changed, those circumstances have changed. And again, given the context of this development, you know, providing parking at the rear just wouldn't really be appropriate for a highway for a service station. So we feel that these non-compliances are acceptable, and we've recommended approval of the application subject to conditions of consent. Just point out a couple of the conditions. As I mentioned before, we require a 10,000 litre above ground rainwater or below ground rainwater storage tank. We've conditioned the need for some pedestrian access to the site from the front of the site. That's in there. There's obviously our standard conditions of consent that you would normally see for a service station development. There's need for a pedestrian safety fence along the front of the site, and that was a requirement or a recommendation from Transport for New South Wales. I'll just point out too, condition 25, there's just a typo in there, that that's on page 62. It's prior to the issue of any occupation certificate, and then it's got delete 1, that can come out. So as I said, the recommendation is for approval subject to conditions of consent.
Thanks, Matt. Councillor Campbell, I'll start with you this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I am disappointed that it's not for heavy vehicles. I thought that it would be an ideal location to not only fuel heavy vehicles there, especially going to the industrial area and sale yards. Yeah, I just thought that this was going to encompass that. The other thing is, you spoke about the was it 10,000 litre water tank? What's that going to do? What in other words, is it going to be connected to town water supply? And this 10,000 litres doesn't seem a very large tank, especially in a dry time.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, so the development will be connected to town water. This is just supplementary water for irrigation for gardens and toilet flushing. It's a sustainability initiative.
Matt, could you adjust the screen for me so that we can see Councillor Abbott, who I'm about to hand to. So do you have any comments?
Yes, I have comments. As always, I feel we have enough petrol stations in Scone, and I think this has the potential to become yet another stranded asset. And climate change is obviously looming and here, and we should be looking at putting in electric vehicle charging stations and not more petrol stations. And we should be moving away from fossil fuels. And unfortunately, our local environment plan still permits this type of development. So those are my comments with respect to climate change and stranded assets of fossil fuel projects.
Matt, thank you. Matt, in broader terms, do you have any response to the councillor's comments? And in terms of the LEP, I mean, it seems to me that we're regularly getting development applications for petrol stations, diesel stations. Some, obviously in this instance with the bypass, I can see that some service stations have been taken out of use. There are, at least 2 that I can think of that are no longer operational within town. And these can be seen as a replacement for that. But in broader terms, having just returned from New Zealand, where on the South Island petrol stations are actually quite hard to find, and we have a plethora of them. We have several that are approved within the Shire that haven't been built. Is there any mechanism in the LEP in the future for the next council to consider how we can address this issue that the councillor has raised?
Through the chair, look, I guess as you pointed out, service stations are permissible in this particular zone. We still have vehicles that use fuel on the roads, so there is still a need for service stations. I know that we have considered quite a number of service stations in recent times for Scone in particular. I guess at the end of the day, it really will be up to market forces to determine which service station will be built and which ones won't go ahead. We live in a free market. We can't really control that. I guess, I mean, obviously over time things will change. There'll be more of these electric charging stations that will appear. I have no doubt that will happen. But in the meantime, yeah, I mean, service stations are still a lawful use, and they're still lawful under our LEP. So we can certainly look at in the future when we do review our LEP, how we can try and encourage other types of or additional electric charging stations and those sorts of things.
It's my understanding that we can't actually limit them though through a new LEP, can we?
No, that's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah.
Just, Mr. Chair, just a comment. I believe if there's a sensible area for a service station to go, that is probably it. As far as Councillor Campbell, the trucks, I think the new service station at Murrundi now is trucks southbound and the BP's trucks northbound. Is that correct?
I believe so. That's right.
Right. Is there any further comment?
Could I just have one further comment?
Yeah.
Is there, you mentioned that there could be. I really think that this is a great area for trucks to be fueled. It's out of the out of an area. It's in an industrial area where the noise is not a problem to households. And you've just said that maybe it it was you might consider that. I would, the application is not for that at this stage, but is there any definite plans to have it for trucks, for heavy vehicles? Because that's in the original. When I first heard about this, I was told, not by you, but that it was going to be more for heavy vehicles, which I thought was a really good idea because it's out in an industrial area. So there really isn't any concrete plans to put in an area that heavy vehicles can fuel there. Is that correct?
Not at this stage. However, again, market forces, if the demand is there and we can quantify that demand, it's definitely something that we'll look at.
Is there a sufficient land to put in the area there for heavy vehicles to on this complex?
At this stage, there is.
At this stage. Okay. All right.
I think the possibility of a rest stop, although it's not it's not relevant to this application, but I think there is suitable room and it might be a suitable spot for a heavy vehicle rest stop and facilities for those that drive them. Anyway, back to the application. Do we have a mover for the recommendation?
Yeah, I'll move it. I've spoken about my reservations, but I think that it's a good area to have. It's out of the way, so I'll so move.
I'm happy to second it. Is there all in favour?
Aye.
And against? Councillor Abbott. So the motion is carried. So Oliver, just this will, all the recommendations from today's meeting will obviously be taken to the July council meeting. You're aware of that, and for a final decision of council. You're very free to go. We'll move on to DESC 07.3, which is the game chiller.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, Sue. I'm just moving on to DESC 07.3, and we're about to hear from the applicant, Guy Rando. So when you're ready, Guy.
Good morning. My name's Guy Rando. I run the game meet depot at Blandford, and I thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'd just like to explain the accreditation side of our game meat field depot at Blandford. We are OEH compliant, we are Safe Food compliant, and New South Wales Firearms Registry compliant. The depot is subject to routine inspections of various types. The depot handles kangaroos, deer, pig, goat and rabbit carcasses. We have all the relevant licences here, if anyone would like to see those. They're up to date and for your viewing if you like. The hours of operation dictated by our National Kangaroo Harvester Field Dressing Manual. Further restricted at Blandford to allow entry of harvested animals only from sunset to 6:30 a.m, which our code of practice does allow us to 2 hours after sunup. But with the objections of certain things, we've decided to cut it back to 6:30 a.m. So the public don't view the kids on the school bus, parents and that don't actually see anything which the complaints were made about. Regarding the objections, the school bus stop referred to in the complaints is unsigned, non-designated stop, which sees children cross the busy New England highway after leaving the bus. Whilst objections refer only to kangaroo carcasses, I feel it's emotionally motivated. We are compliant in every way. We are a legal business, a legal industry. And it's an important means of utilising the feral animals, the deer, pigs, goats and rabbits. The depot also has supplied Devil Ark project from time to time when required. I note that the Upper Hunter Local Environment Plan land use table permits the use of this land for rural industries. And I note that a game field depot operates nearby Pages River Marunlo without a development approval. I know the faded white derelict container on the New England Highway also opposite the Blandford School, which has not attracted any other objections or attention, which I feel we've sort of been looked at a little bit unfairly. Again, maybe emotionally motivated for the kangaroo side of things. The economic impact, the game field meat depot is utilised by 18 harvesters, resulting in significant economic impact. The income generated is seen in expenditure in fuels, tyres, repairs, mortgage payments, education and so on. The data from Cool Off Proprietary Limited demonstrates an average of $350,000 a year, which goes back into the community. Please note the contrast to the vast sums expended on aerial culling in which carcasses are wasted. We like to be able to utilise these animals. The location, harvesting of kangaroos, deer, pigs, goat and rabbit will continue in Australia regardless as a means of utilising this often wasted resource. Despite the emotive issues surrounding kangaroo harvesting in particular, closing my depot does not solve those emotional objections. Harvest will simply be forced elsewhere. The location of the chiller or game meat depot is geographically critical due to all-weather access for harvesters and the collection vehicle. In view of the considerable economic impact of the game meat field depot, I request the assistance of Council in continuing the operation of the facility, especially in view of objections against the visual appearance and easily remedied by painting and or landscaping. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Do councillors have any questions or committee members have any questions?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, being a landowner, I also understand the impact of pigs, deer and kangaroos. You can go onto anybody's farm and you'll always find kangaroos, but you don't find little kangaroos in that chiller because they're always left. And it's the big carcasses that are put in there, and they are always head shot because they're not allowed to. I was on the LLS, so I do know what we're talking about. Is this chiller used all the year round? And my second thing is the washing out. I understand that there is there very much, shall we say, refuse washed out, and what steps have been taken to minimise the impact of washing out?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, we do. We run 52 weeks of the year. Right. We weather permitting, of course. There is a minimal amount of water. We have a 9,000 litre tank of water, which usually lasts about 3 months. So most of our harvesters wash their vehicles at home. We don't really like to have it hosed off there on site. It's mainly to keep the stand clean and the interior.
Just further, Mr. Chair, yeah, I think you mentioned the fact that all the hunters are all accredited, and also the food safety people inspected. Is that very often that what I'm getting at is that my understanding is the facility is very clean. It's kept up to standard, and is it inspected every month, 2 months, or 6 months, or what's the case? Just to let the people know.
Yep. Well, as you said, all shooters are accredited. They're Food Authority compliant, OEH compliant, Firearms Registry compliant. We have routine inspections from OEH. They're maybe every 2-3 weeks, sometimes 2 months. They're just at chance, they take those. And we have a Food Authority audit every 12 months on the chiller. And we also have routine inspections as they're coming past. They might ring up and say, just a random check that we'll be calling in to assess your site, which we allow them 100% to go to that, have a look, check the relevant paperwork. So yeah, it's all very professional. And
is there any other location that this chiller could be nearby, or which would be feasible?
This is suitable for a few reasons. The power, 3-phase power, we've got access to that. All-weather access for the truck and for our harvesters, and it's on the highway there. It's a good spot for the logistics of the company to pick up from. But yeah, it's a prime spot. It ticks all the boxes.
Okay, just one further question. If a visibility screen, which you've suggested, which I would like to be extended, I don't think it's big enough, so that it's completely blocks off any visual sight from the highway or walking past, that would then negate many of the objections. I see, I've read the objections. But if that was the case, would you be agreeable to doing that? I think the one that you've got suggested is just too small, but the idea is fine.
Yeah.
I just think that if it was probably twice as long, the 6 or 7 metres long by 4 metres high, which means that the trucks would be completely covered from any visual sight from the side.
Yeah.
Would you consider that?
We'd consider that. We'd also like to consider maybe landscaping it.
Yep.
Or maybe putting some sort of mural perhaps on the side, a painting, something like they do with the silos now out west. Perhaps an Aboriginal art. Kangaroos are very, to the Aboriginal side of things. So perhaps that's something we'd look at as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you, Daryl. Not Daryl. How are these animals transported to the chiller?
Yeah, the vehicles are all accredited, all the shooters, they're food authority compliant again, which we have an inspection or an audit on those vehicles at least once every 2 years. So yeah, they are transported via the vehicle.
So just to go, Mr. Chair, so they're opened, those vehicles are opened?
They are, yes.
Right, so, and I see most of the objections here are to do with school hours. Your hours certainly do not come within school bus times. So those animals would travel the highway in the open space.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, we've bought that 6:30 a.m. curfew for that reason. So there is no reason, or there'll be no one seeing from the school kids or school bus. We'll have no vision of any of that.
Yep. Okay, yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. As Councillor Campbell said, I'd be keen to see that if this went through, that barrage a little bit bigger. But yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I've got a couple of questions just from your comments, Guy, but they're actually I'm going to ask them to Matt. You mentioned that the bus stop is not a designated stop, but it says in our paperwork that it is. The site is adjacent to a designated school bus stop and can be observed by children and parents utilising the bus stop. Is it designated or is it not? And what are the differences?
Through the chair, look, I'd have to take that on notice and check that, but the report's telling me it is, so I can only go off that at this point in time. But I'd have to check with the assessing officer to see if that was verified. But I think Guy might have a comment on that.
There's no signage or slow down, no traffic signage at all to say that there is a bus stop there. I think it's been a goodwill thing with the owner of Blandford Store to allow that for those people as a convenience, as against an actual designated signage and signed off.
Yeah. And the other thing you mentioned, which caught my attention, which I'm not sure was in your submission that we've read already. You mentioned another facility, and in the interest of fairness, I think if we're aware of other facilities that are operating without a DA, then we need to follow up on that as well.
Yeah, through the chair, that's a fair comment. I wasn't aware of another facility that was operating. I'm not sure if it's got consent. We'd have to obviously go through our records and see if it has consent.
Perhaps we can check that. Now, normally I'll go around the room, but it's my turn to start. So my comments were that we have a recommendation to refuse. We do have an applicant though who has expressed willingness to make some further adjustments to this. We don't actually have a facility because there are no recommended conditions of approval here. So I'm just looking around at my co-committee. Are you of a mind to defer this issue pending conditions of consent with increased screening and landscaping? And is it possible to move this chiller just slightly further back or away, or is that going to interfere with the heavy vehicle collection?
Well, there's considerable cost to shift it over, but we could look at that. Definitely look at shifting it perhaps 5 metres. If we go too far, I think it'll cause more issues. If we go further down, trying to get in with access of the truck, where it is now, it parks parallel to the highway.
Yeah.
Whereas if we go too far in the paddock, it'll actually be, the prime mover will be facing out on the road.
But, 5 metres is 5 metres. I mean, that could allay some concerns. I mean, I'm just cognizant that I've had numerous calls about this chiller and numerous. I perhaps have more calls about this DA than you would expect, and I'm just wary of I think you're operating a business that's entirely legal and supportable and sustainable, and I have absolutely no qualms at all about that. The only issue is that you don't have a valid DA. understand the logic of the location and the situation and how it's convenient for you all. And I want to explore ways that allow us to approve this. And if you're in a position to compromise and make me move a little bit and beef up the screening and the landscaping, then I'm looking at my colleagues here to see if they're of the same mind to defer this issue.
Through you, Mr. Chair, will we have council give us the report on this matter before we? I would not be of the view to defer. I would be going with council's recommendations. But do we get the report before we make any decision? Because we haven't had the report yet.
Defer to come back to it to possibly the next meeting.
Well, I'd be against it.
Yeah.
But I think the objections are very plain. And I would definitely be, I am totally with council staff on this.
I very much understand the objections. However, I think that with screening, perhaps moving the chiller and other things, that these objections are not insurmountable. I noticed that one of the objections indeed, specifically mentions that. But this issue is generating angst and concern, and that's been quite widely expressed, certainly to me, and I don't know to the others as well.
I can assure you, I have had a huge amount of correspondence, and I've also corresponded with people and phone calls, and I've been stopped in car parks and supermarkets about this issue. But are you intending to defer this before we actually discuss this as an agenda item today?
Well, I gave you the opportunity to comment earlier, did I not? If I haven't,
you've asked if we had questions of the participants.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. So yeah, no, if you would like to comment.
So what my question?
I went. Sorry, just to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I went first because it was my turn to go first. So yeah, I will. I'll hand over to you.
But no, but we haven't actually heard from council, have we yet? You asked Matt questions after Mr. Rando.
Right. So I'm getting.
Yeah. Yes. So we're not following process.
Yeah.
So
just through you, Mr. Chair, if I can just describe the process. If you choose to defer today, we would definitely bring back the report to the next council meeting with a set of consent conditions for your consideration. It would not be a blank report. So we would develop a set of conditions based on the comments that we've heard today for your consideration.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, as yet, we haven't even reached this agenda item. We've just heard Mr. Rando give his public participation. So when do we get to this item as such? When do you make a call on it?
Well, we'll hear from Matt now, and then we'll go around.
Thank you.
As normal, and then Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, so as you know, this is an application for a game meat storage chiller at 48 Salisbury Street in Blandford. This all started back in November of last year when we received a complaint about the building. It suddenly appeared on the site, and concerns about the actual activity. We started discussions, I guess, with Guy late last year about the land use, and looked at different ways we could, I guess, still allow the activity to occur, but possibly, move the building or find another location for the activity. So just to make it clear, I mean, from a planning point of view, we don't have any issues with the industry or anything like that at all. This is really about the use of this particular site and the structure, I guess, the structure itself, the visual impacts of the structure, and the activity that's right on the highway, right on that front boundary. The application was notified. We received 5 submissions from members of the public, and those submissions are attached to the report. They raise various concerns, mainly in relation to the activity itself and the visual impacts of the activity. And we've already spoken about some of those things today. We've done a detailed assessment. Our main issues, I guess, would be, as I said, the visual impacts of the development itself. It's not in keeping with the character of the area, that structure, in terms of its location. We find it visually obtrusive and detracts from the streetscape. The development's not, the site itself isn't suitable for the proposed development. due to its close proximity to residential premises, a school bus stop and the highway. As I said, we've received 5 submissions expressing concerns about the visual impacts of development. And because of the issues that have been raised, we feel that the development is not in the public interest, as the adverse impacts on neighbourhood amenity outweigh the potential economic benefits to the community. However, in saying that, I think if we could come to some sort of compromise if the building could be relocated or moved back off the front boundary, I think we could probably consider that the impacts have been minimised and may be able to support the application. But the way it stands at the moment, we can't support the application, and we're recommending refusal subject to the reasons listed in attachment 1.
Whose turn is it? Councillor Abbott.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I follow Council's recommendation and I object to this development, or rather this, yes, I object to this. And part of my reasons are, well, for all the reasons of the refusal that Council have outlined, the 5 reasons. And also further to that, in my opinion, there's a hidden cruelty here, and that this is a commercial kill of Australian wildlife. I understand that there are some feral animals there, but kangaroos are not feral. I think with the actual killing of the animals, there's no public scrutiny. This isn't like an abattoir where we get to see how this is all done. And I basically think there's no effective monitoring of animal welfare. And I've listened to people who have approached me by their various means, and I sympathise with them, and I completely understand. And I'm opposed to this, and I completely agree with Council's recommendation.
Could I just comment on that as being inhumane? We have a code of practice which is overseen by the Firearms Registry. We, every 5 years, do a marksman's test to prove of our accuracy. Now, any one of our shooters, if they are found to be in breach of that, are fined, which I have not heard of any fines in the last 2 years of being a body shot. So it's not it's a very professional industry, which we undergo so many different tests, compliance issues. I just honestly think that all the complaints lead back to the kangaroo. And I know it's not a feral animal, but we are licensed to harvest them and utilise them, as against being shot and just left on the ground, which does happen, unfortunately. This business and industry, that's what we want to do. We want to utilise the kangaroo, pigs, goats and deer.
Thank you for your comment. Councillor Campbell, your views?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, on my way over, coming back from Tamworth yesterday, I listened to on the ABC regarding the fact that we should be eating more kangaroo meat, as our Indigenous people did before we came, and maybe still do, I'm not sure. And the way in which that that this is better for our health and better for the environment. Now, how many animals are in your chiller that have a body shot?
0.
Because that's one of the requirements for that they have to be a headshot.
That's correct.
That's correct?
Yeah.
So therefore, if, let me say this, if a kangaroo is hit in the head with a high caliber rifle, it's an instantaneous death.
That's correct.
Right, so it's not inhumane.
No.
Okay. The second thing is that I would be, I'm happy to defer, but we need to have that report for our next council meeting, but we need to have a visible screen, I'm suggesting to you, 8 metres by 4 metres high erected. And maybe if you could shift that back from the highway, maybe 5 metres, but this screen has to be up, but then plant trees along there.
Yeah.
So that, and still leave the screen there so that it is less less obtrusive. I am supportive of what you are doing because I do know that there are, if you can go around some of the farms and some of the places, you will see lots of pigs, lots of things, just rotting carcasses on the side of the road or in the paddock, including kangaroos. And having professional people harvest the kangaroos, it is a proper industry, but it's also stopping a lot of inhumane crippling of kangaroos because they're not the marksmen. So I would be going against the recommendation and then approve it. However, I do believe that if we have this coming back to the council meeting for determination, provided that it has the screen 8 metres by 4 metres with and move the chiller back sufficiently so that a row of trees could be there, could be planted. I'd be happy to support that. But in other words, can that come back to council for determination at their next council meeting? Would that be able to be done, Matt?
Yes, as long as we have that information from the applicant, we can.
Well, I guess that's on you, Doug, so that you provide that information and put that forward so it can be determined. I think I don't want to see this go because I've been on the land all my life and I was at Binaway and grew up there, and lots and lots of kangaroos and things were shot and just left there, not in the same way that these people are using their professionalism. And I also have noted that, yes, and I've seen some of the marksmanship of these people at 200 metres, they're putting in 3 bullets in that big.
Yeah.
Now, you've got to be a good marksman to do that.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can I ask Mr. Pringle a question?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Mr. Pringle, with respect to this development application, already the enterprise doesn't have consent. So whatever we decide today, will they have to stop operating?
Through the chair, we have started the process of enforcement action. However, we wouldn't continue that until this application is determined. Either way.
So they can continue operating without consent, even though other businesses have been told to close when they didn't have consent?
Through the chair, the normal process is that if an application has been submitted, you would wait until that application is determined before you proceed
Thank you.
further with enforcement action.
Thank you.
Right. As I've already indicated, I would not support the approval of this DA as it is, because I don't think it sufficiently addresses the concerns that have been raised by several people over quite a period of time with regard to this activity. However, I want to give the applicant the opportunity to adjust the application and amend the application, modify it in such a way that will appease, I suppose is the correct word, the concerns or mitigate the concerns of those who are objecting, in terms of, I'm not going to specify a size of screen or whatever, but obviously the activity needs to be screened from that school bus stop, designated or otherwise. And if we can set the chiller back even 5 metres, I don't know, just if you can go away and work on some plans that would address the concerns of the objectors, I'm very happy to move that we defer and give you that opportunity, because otherwise, to me, it seems it's a lawful business,
Yeah,
albeit operating without a DA. But then, you're operating in a legal sector, and you're providing a service and employment, and et cetera, et cetera.
Can I just make a comment about the complaints were not made by parents of school children. They were made by individuals that do not drop their kids off to school there. That's what I find a little bit, I guess, off centre, that the complaints, fair enough if they were by the parents, by the kids, but the complaints weren't made by the parents.
They were actually made by another citizen, not of Blandford. They do not reside there. They are from the town. So I just wanted to, make that point. So I don't think the issue is that much with the parents and the kids. All those kids are from rural backgrounds. They've probably seen a lot worse than what we see. And like I say, the cut-off time is 6:30 a.m. now. So there'll be just for that reason. So we don't have that issue.
Again, I would expect hours of operation to be in any proposed conditions of consent, so that we avoid that possibility. So if you're prepared to do that, I'm happy to move that we defer consideration of this pending modification to the application.
Thank you.
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Chair.
All in favour? Against?
And I object to it.
Yeah.
And me, I against that.
Okay, back to the agenda. Do we have any councillor questions? Councillor Campbell.
Perhaps only one, Mr. Chair. The development above the McDonald's facility in Scone, it's been determined by the Department of Planning that it has the go-ahead. Is that correct?
Through the chair, no, it's determined by the Land Environment Court.
Right.
It was approved by the court.
And is there any further development with the one at Merrywall?
I haven't heard anything from the applicant through you, Mr. Chair.
The only comment I have that they have mowed the lawns, which is much better. Thank you.
Any further questions? No. Councillor Abbott, any questions?
Yes, I have three. Just on petrol stations, what's happening to the investigation to the petrol station that was found to be leaking? Is there anything, do we know anything more about that?
Through the chair, I know the EPA was involved in that investigation. They were working with the owners to address issues on that site. But apart from that, there's no further information at this stage.
Is there any information we can receive from that as to where we're up to? I'd like to know where we're up to with that.
Through the chair, I'll have to take that on notice and come back to the committee.
Thank you. And then also with respect to the start of this meeting and the expectation that I should have made an application to be on this video link, I didn't realise that was necessary for other committees apart from the ordinary council meeting. Is that the case, that every time there's a meeting and we would like to be on video link, that we have to make an application 5 days before?
I'll pass over to the General Manager. That I wasn't aware either, and which is why I was happy to take a verbal application and move that at the start of the meeting. But I'll hand over to the General Manager because I know he has an opinion on this.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Certainly my understanding when Council moved that was it was an amendment to our Code of Meeting Practice. The ordinary Council meeting, the confidential Council meetings and the 3 committee meetings are all operated under the Code of Meeting Practice. So it's certainly my understanding that the interpretation was that it would apply to all meetings.
So I should have, just to clarify through you, Mr. Chair, then I should have made this application 5 business days, I now understand, even though Council doesn't have to give us documents in business days. We have to do this in 5 business days.
That's the way the current wording is. That's the period that Council adopted at the May Council meeting, 5 business days. As we saw at the June Council meeting, councillors fell outside of that 5 days, so they closer to the meeting date made applications because of extenuating circumstances, and they were accepted by the council on the night. So the intent is 5 business days, so we can try and plan around it. But if councillors have got circumstances that become evident within the 5 days and can't give us the appropriate notice, I'm sure the councillors will take that into consideration when they give the that item of business the consideration at the beginning of each meeting.
And my last question is, are council elections still likely to be going ahead given how everything is going to custard with COVID-19?
Yes, through you, Deputy Mayor. It's probably not relevant to this meeting specifically, but we'll probably try to get some information out to councillors later this week. The Office of Local Government has been saying that they are still aiming for a 4th of September election. They are also looking at alternative means of voting, so some electronic voting, if that makes it easier for voters, especially in the Sydney area where they're trying to stop the movement of people. But obviously we need to wait till close to the date before there's any, I guess, final decision, but at this stage it is still going ahead.
Thank you. That's all my questions. They are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Any questions from you, Mr. Mayor? No, right. Well, I'll bring proceedings to a close. Thank you all for your attendance and input. As ever, it is greatly appreciated.